And right, may my blessing, I give you a blessing. L'chai, to life. Bracha, blessings. Okay. All right, folks, welcome. We begin today a new mimer, a new Hasidic discourse. It was said in 1968, almost 60 years ago. Um, Parshas Akib, which is this week's Torah portion, on a was given out. Yeah. So it begins with the words from this week's Torah portion. Ba'ata Israel, and you, and now, Israel, the Jewish people. Ma Hashem Elokecha, what does Hashem your God, Shoel Mimach, request from you? What's he asking from you? Kim liyira, only but to fear God. Only but to fear God. Fear God does not mean fear of punishment. Usually the word fear means fear of punishment. Fear means the presence of God. That someone walks into the room, the presence of an individual makes you act differently. Okay, we're just going to go on that basis right now. We'll get more into it. So that's the phrase from this week's Torah portion, and in the Talmud, so it plays on the words over here of the verse. For those who come to learn Chumash Rashi, so there's a simple meaning of the text that even a 5-year-old can understand, a true 5-year-old, right? And there's the hinted meaning, there's the homiletic meaning, there's the esoteric meaning of the text. And of course, what Chassidus says. So there's many different levels. So here, the Talmud, the Gemara, is taking from these words, that we'll see in a moment, and playing on the words. And we'll see the challenge that the Rebbe will come up with. Okay. So again, what has Hashem, your God, ask of you? God's asking from us. What's he asking? We should fear him. In other words, be mindful that he's present. So the Talmud says, though, and plays on these words, it says that a person is obligated to make 100 blessings a day. So I made my blessing on the coffee already, right? Blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Here's Shahakol Bidbarai. It's the blessing. I didn't say the blessing again. I just said it without God's name. Right? Chaim. That's what it means, using God's name in a blessing. So the Talmud says that a person has to make 100 blessings a day. How do we know that? Where does that come from? Because the verse says, now Israel, what does God ask from you? So don't read it ma, read it maya. Don't read it what, read it maya. It's a similar word. We'll see there's a difference. Ma is spelled mem hey, means what. Maya is spelled mem with a hey, but in between the mem and the hey, there's an aleph, the letter aleph. So read it 100. Maya means 100. Now what God is asking from you is 100. 100 blessings every day. Whether just to break it down, if you pray 3 times a day the Amida, that itself has 19 blessings. So that's already 57 right there, right? There's many others in the blessing in prayer that we make. That the Talmud goes and delineates how you get to 100, and it's not so difficult. That sounds difficult, but someone who prays 3 times a day, right away. Each Amida, each silent prayer, each Shemona Esrei is called, has 19 blessings. Okay, Tzarech Lahavin, we need to understand. So we're now going to ask some questions over here. The idea of what and 100 are 2 different ideas completely. In other words, the Talmud is playing on the word, which is something it does. Playing on the word, though, the question over here is, when you play on a word and get a different meaning, right? Um, Getting a different meaning, that they should be related. The ideas shouldn't be separate completely. Playing on the word, separate ideas. But here they're separate ideas. As a matter of fact, they're even opposites, because the word ma, what, shows on something very small. Like, what is that? It's showing on something either insignificant or that's small. Well, what could that be already? Like, it's small, insignificant. And 100, on the other hand, is a big number. And actually, it's not just a big number, it's a complete number. 100 is a complete number. What does that mean? Because 10 is 10 powers of the soul, 10 divine attributes, and in 10 times 10, each one coupled with another makes 100. That's an idea of completion. 10 is a complete number. 10 times 10 is even more complete, right? Why? Because God has 10 divine attributes, and you couple each one, right? When we do Sfiras Omer, the counting of the Omer, right? For 7 weeks, it's 7 times 7, because that's 7 emotions coupled with another emotions, that's 7 times 7. So the first night in the counting of the Omer, the night after the first Seder, the first Passover Seder, and it's the count between Passover and Shavuos, the giving of the Torah, and Mount Sinai. So 7 emotions, 7 times 7 is 49. 49 days, the 50th day, we got the Torah, right? So there's a count. We begin with chesed of chesed, the kindness of kindness. Then the second day would be the gvura, the discernment within kindness. And we go all the way to the 49th is malchus of malchus, royalty within royalty. That's only 7 emotions, though. It doesn't include the intelligence. And why it doesn't is not important over here. But the point is that we do bring each attribute coupled with another. So a perfect number is 100, which shows on completion, on something great. As opposed to the word ma, what, like, shows insignificance. Like, what is this? Doesn't show on something, significant. So, and especially according to Chassidus, that the word the word explains the word meya is different than the word ma by one letter, the letter aleph, the first letter of the alphabet, right? I'll try to have this all printed out for tomorrow so you could see it. Most of you, I think, know the Hebrew alphabet, I hope. L'chaim, l'chaim. So the additional letter aleph are the letters Pella, wonderment. So mystical teachings, Chassidus explains that aleph shows on as we know, that the letters are the letters in the Hebrew alphabet, in the Hebrew tongue, in the holy tongue, are vital force of the divine as God creates with the letters. So this is a creative force, the letter Aleph, that shows on Soivev Kol Amin, shows on the divine energy and power that encompasses creation, not within creation, but beyond creation. You have the letters that are invested within creation, right? That make this paper cup a paper cup different than this hat, right? Each one has its unique, vibrant energy force of the divine that are based on the letters that make up the word of the particular creation. So there's an energy field that is enclosed within creation that makes it unique. There's also an energy field and a light and a divine power of God that encompasses the created being, and it shows on something beyond that is an equalizer, if you will, an equalizer of all of creation. Okay, that's called Sovev, encompassing light of God. So the letter Aleph, right, which is the addition to the word Ma of what, that makes the word Meya, has that divine energy power that is all encompassing, which means it shows on its greatness, on its exaltedness, as just as in the number 100, as we just explained, right? 10 times 10 shows on a completion, an exaltedness, on something great. In other words, it's like contrary to the word ma, what? Right? And just adding to the question, right? This is adding to the question that when you want to play on a word, which that's one of the ways we learn in the Torah, we don't just learn in the simple meaning, as explained. We also take a verse and take words, and there's a hinted meaning, a homiletic meaning. So we play on it, right? So, but there has to be something mutually inclusive or connecting between them. Here we're showing that two very distinct and opposite ideas, small and big. Also, we need to understand, where does this whole idea that we need to make 100 blessings a day come from? So we just said from the verse, but it's not really from the verse. It's a story that happened in Tanakh with King David. King David was the king, and he instituted with the court, the Sanhedrin in his time, that we have to make 100 blessings a day. So this is a decree from King David's time onward. It wasn't before that, right? And if you look in the book of Shmuel, book of Samuel, so it speaks about over there that on the verse, second, that speaks the individual, the man, that he hukam al. The word al is the gematria, the numeric value of 100. So now, what is the reason that King David instituted 100 blessings? Because there was in his time 100 people that were dying a day. And they couldn't figure out what's going on. Why are 100 people dying every day? It wasn't, wasn't a plague, right? And also, even a plague, 100 every day. One day will be 59, another day will be 129, right? 100 every day. Obviously, that was heavenly. That was coming from heaven. The truth is, even if it was 59 and the next day was 123, that's also from heaven. Right? But this was a clear sign that it's from heaven. 100 every day that were dying, and they were trying to figure out until with Ruach HaKodesh, with prophetic vision, they knew that that what the remedy to the 100 people dying every day would be. 100 blessings have to be said every day, and that's why it was instituted. So, but where it's coming from is from a verse in Shmuel, in the book of Samuel, that's speaking about the incident, and the word al there, so it's played on the word al, that the numeric value of al is ayin is 70, and lamed is 30. That's 70 and 30 is 100. From there, hinting in that's called numeric values, gematria, right? Hint there that 100 blessings. So this is what was instituted in order to save the lives. Which, by the way, just incidentally, just very important, that a side point is that what do we see over here? That physical death in this world is a spiritual matter. So it's not sufficient to have the doctors to figure out whatever they can figure out. One needs to recognize that it's a spiritual matter. That's where it begins. And that's what they did. They couldn't figure out what was the spiritual lacking that brought to 100 deaths every day until they recognized that the way to fix it is 100 blessings, and that's what they did. Okay. Now, so the idea that from our Torah portion, don't read what, but read 100, is really not the place where this was instituted. It's what we called in the Talmudic jargon an asmachta. It's sort of like an aside, just sort of like another place where we can kind of pin this idea, but it's not the original place. It's not the main place, as a matter of fact. It's not from here that obligation comes. That's what's key. It doesn't come from here, right? Because it comes from the book of Samuel, where it says over there. Now, so putting that into perspective, we need to appreciate, if you read the verse in our Torah portion, right? The what now, Israel, what does God request from you? Only to fear him. What? The what? And we say what instead of the what What is he requesting? 100, right? That's how we're playing on it, right? But if you read the verse further, and that's what the Talmud is saying, right? The Talmud is saying. But if you read the verse further, it doesn't say just to fear him, but says to love him too. So it comes out that in order to come to a fear of God and to love him, both things, is through 100 blessings, right? So if that's the case, right, the way we're learning that right, if that's the case, then why was it that we waited until King David that people were dying, and therefore that's when it was instituted 100 blessings? If the way to come to fear God and to love him is through 100 blessings, the verse says it should have been instituted earlier. Why wait to terrible times, right? If it's the vehicle, in other words, it's not just a vehicle from the verse, it's not just as a vehicle to stop the death, which is obviously wonderful, amazing, right? But it's also a positive thing. It brings you to the fear and love of God. Oh, then that's something should have been there already, earlier, should have been instituted by the rabbinic figures. Why wasn't it? Oh, powerful questions. And we're going to have some powerful answers. But guess what, folks? You have to come back. As always. Okay, we'll see you soon.